Did you know that while millions of fishermen around the world are going crazy over
This
branded
depth finder
lures
reading
and
seems off.
top-tier fish
Let
finders,
me...
real trophies are quietly swimming where armchair experts wouldn't even think to cast a line? In 2002, a statistical explosion occurred in Texas that
Beaver
glossy
Creek, July
magazines still
47.
hide
Best
to
hole
this
below.
day.
A fine, varied
Ordinary
harvest from these
anglers
Northwoods
caught
waters.
78
The
different
season's
species
been
of
generous.
fish and submitted 600 official applications for state records. Moreover, these giants were pulled from 207 different bodies of water, most of which you won't find in any tourist guidebooks. This video is not just another top lakes list. It is my manifesto against the marketing lies that force you to go where there are more boats than fish. We are used to thinking that records live in media meccas like Lake Fork or Sam Rayburn, but the truth is much more cynical. Trophies do not like noise. My hero today is Hollis Greer, an ichthyologist with 28 years of experience in the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, who retired in 2003, leaving behind not just an archive, but a real treasure map. For 3 decades, he took samples in places that caravans of trailers flew past at full speed. While others rushed to hyped-up spots, this man knew what fishing guides kept quiet about. Small reservoirs are real monster-producing factories if they are left alone. Recall our history, for it is so similar to how Soviet ichthyologists worked on the Dnieper, the Volga, or in the quiet tributaries of the Irtysh. While official reports announced tons of catch in the Caspian, village men in the remote snags of Siberia and Kazakhstan, using homemade spoons made from dinner spoons, pulled out such master pikes and humpback perches that modern gear would simply crumble into splinters. Fishing in those days was not a hobby, but a way of survival, a sacred ritual where knowledge of fish habits was valued higher than the presence of imported fishing line. Fishing traditions in the USSR were built on observing nature, not on reading advertising brochures. We knew that if the water bloomed or the level dropped, the fish would go into the holes, and no secret bait would lure them out. Today's scientific approach confirms what our grandfathers knew intuitively. The biological mechanism of the bite is tied to metabolism, the level of dissolved oxygen, and, most importantly, the absence of stress. When a boat with a powerful motor passes over a fish's head every 5 minutes, the cortisol level in its blood skyrockets, and it stops feeding, entering a deep state of suspended animation. 5th place on Greer's list is occupied by Lake Merval, 3,800 acres in Panola County. This is a real black water of East Texas, built back in 1958. The water here is dark, like strong tea, due to tannins washed out of the pine forests, exactly like in our peat lakes of Polesi or in the Karelian Lambushkas. The bottom of Merval is a cemetery of submerged stumps and standing trees that have been rotting there for over 60 years. And here lies the first myth. Many believe that in murky and cluttered water, large fish cannot see the bait. Nonsense. Ichthyology tells us that in large perch or pike, the lateral line is so developed that they hear the vibration of a spinnerbait blade from dozens of meters away. Merval consistently produces specimens weighing over 3 to 4 kilo, and over the last decade, real 10-pound monsters have been caught here. And all this with practically zero fishing pressure. While the crowd rushes to Sam Rayburn, located 90 miles to the south, Merval quietly grows giants. Greer conducted control catches here with electrofishing every 2 years and discovered a phenomenal pattern. The lack of pressure allows the fish to reach maximum sizes without the risk of being caught at a young age. Delicate gear does not work here. Forget about thin fluorocarbon if you don't want to leave your lure in the very first snag. In these inky waters, bright colors are favored. Chartreuse, white, contrasting blue-black, a slow retrieve of a spinnerbait in the spring, or a heavy jig with large silicone in the summer. That is the key to success. The fish needs to be given time to aim in low visibility conditions. The main mistake of modern anglers is haste. We try to comb the area as quickly as possible, forgetting that a trophy is an old, wise predator with a slow metabolism. It will not chase your bait. It waits for the perfect moment. The traditions of our fathers, who could sit for hours at one spot with a bottom line or a fat worm, are more relevant today than ever. Knowledge accumulated over decades of fieldwork shows. Nature does not tolerate fuss, and the biggest secrets are revealed to those who know how to listen to the silence of forgotten reservoirs. We are only beginning this journey through Hollis Greer's list, and ahead of us are places that will overturn your understanding of where records actually hide. Knowledge is the only tackle that will never fail. Moving on to number 4 on Hollis Greer's list, Lake Nakanish. This is a tiny mirror of water by Texas standards, only 692 acres, lost in the forests of Nacogdoches County. Its history began quite recently, in 2009, when the Nakanish and Telesco creeks were dammed. And here we encounter the most powerful biological phenomenon, which I call the new water effect. Remember the grand construction projects of socialism, when cascades of hydroelectric power stations were built on the Volga, Dnieper, or Angara. The first 15 or 20 years after flooding the floodplain is the golden age of any reservoir. Science gives a clear answer. When huge land masses are flooded, a massive release of organic matter occurs. Rotting grass, shrubs, and soil release a colossal amount of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus. This triggers an explosive growth of phytoplankton, followed by a demographic explosion of the food base: roach, crucian carp, and bleak. A predator in such conditions doesn't just live, it feasts, reaching record sizes 2 to 3 times faster than in old, stable rivers. Nakanish entered the peak phase of trophy production in 2019 and is in it right now. This is that very hidden treasure that local fishermen prefer to keep quiet about. In January 2024, a specimen weighing almost 4 kilos was recorded here, caught at depth by an ordinary fisherman from the small town of Garrison. And there are dozens of such reports, but they don't make the front pages of newspapers. Why? Hollis Greer explained it simply. Infrastructure. A small concrete boat ramp, a tiny parking lot, the absence of wide roads. Marketers simply cannot bring crowds of tourists here, which means the lake does not bring profit to advertising agencies. But for us, this is a plus. At Nakanish, the forest still stands. Submerged oaks and pines stick out of the water, creating an ideal labyrinth for a large predator's ambush. The cast and pull tactic doesn't work here. You must literally tear the bait through the branches. Heavy jig heads, which Americans call football jigs, and bulky silicone baits in green pumpkin color are in use here. Vertical presentation is important. If your lure passed 1.5 meters from the trunk, consider that you wasted your time. The large perch here is lazy. It stands flush against the tree, and the bait must fall right on its head. This is tough, masculine fishing, requiring braided lines capable of uprooting a stump. And now let's move to the 3rd place on our list, Lake Tyler. This is the complete opposite of Nakanish. Built in 1949 and expanded in 1967, it seems like an old man from whom no surprises are expected. But this is exactly where the main myth of the fishing community lies, the idea that in old reservoirs, the fish have degenerated or been fished out. Hollis Greer proved the opposite. Over the decades, a unique structural complexity has formed in Lake Tyler. While in new reservoirs the snags are only just beginning to rot, here an ecosystem has already developed with ideal rock ridges, deep channel edges, and patches of relic vegetation. Tyler has remained in the shadow of its neighbor, Lake Palestine, where all regional tournaments flock, for years. This is a classic situation we observed in the post-Soviet period. Everyone goes to the famous Volga deltas, driving past small floodplain lakes where a grass pike has turned into a lake crocodile over a decade of peace. In Lake Tyler, the water is as clear as a tear, which dictates its own rules of the game. If we used coarse gear on the murky Murval, here jewelry comes into play. Hollis noted that local masters use the thinnest fluorocarbon with a breaking strength of only 3 kilodarn and natural bait colors imitating perch or roach. This is no place for noisy rattles. Thin jigs, delicate retrieves over rocks, working on the drop from an edge. This is intellectual fishing, where you need to outplay a fish that has seen hundreds of lures but has never been caught due to its caution. We often forget that in clear water, the light refraction index makes the line visible to the fish if it is not chosen wisely. The scientific justification for success at Lake Tyler is structural stability. Over 40 years, the bottom relief has become predictable for the ichthyofauna. Migration paths of fry are honed to perfection, and large individuals occupy the best spots for years. These are the very prayed-over places our grandfathers knew about, passing the coordinates of holes by word of mouth. The irony is that the modern fisherman, armed with panoptics, often ignores such reservoirs, considering them too simple, a mistake. Hollis Greer, in his electro-fishing reports, indicated that Tyler produces stable results for individuals from 3 to 5 kilogarn decade after decade. No hype, no big names, just quiet, high-quality trophy fishing for those who understand the biology of the reservoir. We have analyzed two completely different types of reservoirs, the young and daring Nakanish and the wise, structurally complex Tyler. Both are united by one factor, the absence of pressure. The fish here are not trained to fear the sound of an electric motor or the glint of a lure. It behaves naturally, as a predator at the top of the food chain should. But ahead of us is a real engineering paradox of Texas and a reservoir that destroyed all of Hollis Greer's ideas about where a giant fish can survive and grow. Are you ready to learn how water level stability creates a record-breaking machine, and why murky sludge can be more valuable than crystal lakes? The knowledge we are now revealing is not just advice. It is the key to understanding why some return from fishing with an empty net, blaming the weather and the phases of the moon, while others find fish where they shouldn't be. More to come, for we are approaching the top of Hollis's list, and a real shock awaits us there. We are approaching the silver of our list, and here, pure engineering magic comes into play. Second place, Lake Nacogdoches. Remember this name, because it is the living embodiment of a biological paradox. 2,200 acres of water on the Angelina River system in deep East Texas. It was created in 1976 for the city's needs. And since then, something has been happening here that 90% of the world's reservoirs are deprived of. The secret of Nacogdoches is stability. Water level fluctuations here are only 30 to 90 cm per year. For comparison, on most large Texas reservoirs and on our hydroelectric cascades on the Volga or Dnieper, the level can swing by 3 to 5 meters. What does this mean for the fish? Imagine that your house is either flooded to the roof or turned into a desert every 3 months. Would you think about reproduction or about gaining extra weight? Of course not. But in Nacogdoches, it's an ideal sanatorium. When the water level is stable, Coastal vegetation does not die, the food base does not migrate, and spawning grounds remain protected. There are no cycles of boom and bust that haunt huge reservoirs. While armchair experts argue about the phases of the moon, Hollis Greer conducted control catches here for decades and saw the same picture: stable reproduction of trophy perch year after year. There are no empty seasons here. The fish simply grows, not distracted by climatic stress. In the Soviet fishing school, such reservoirs were called closed systems, and access to them was often only for party officials or workers of special facilities. Because it was there, in silence and stability, that legendary master specimens grew. The fishing technique at Nacogdoches is a hymn to confidence. The fish here are not intimidated by armadas of boats. Classic spinnerbaits in white chartreuse tones along the forest edge work in the spring. In the summer, soft baits like the wacky rig around boat docks. In the autumn, when the fry gather in schools, jerk baits work perfectly. The whole trick is that the local perch has not learned to ignore standard presentations. Confidence baits work here as they should in an ideal world without pressure. But if Nacogdoches is an oasis of calm, the leader of our list is a real punch to the gut of the entire fishing industry. Number 1 on Hollis Greer's list, Lake J.B. Thomas, 7,300 acres on the Colorado River in West Texas. And here, the real myth-busting begins. Look at this lake. The water in it is the color of brick because of the red clay. Visibility is zero. For decades, it was believed that J.B. Thomas was a dirty puddle where there was nothing to catch. Too murky, too far from civilization, too poor a relief. The entire fishing world of Texas drove past for decades, considering this place hopeless, and they were as wrong as one can possibly be. Around 2022-2023, this dirty trough blew up the statistics of the Share Lunker program. From December 2024 to January 2025, not a single lake in the state, not the legendary Lake Fork, nor the fashionable O.H. Ivy, gave as many official trophies as this murky reservoir in the middle of nowhere. How is this possible? The answer lies in the biology of sensory systems. We humans are used to trusting our eyes. We think, if I can't see my hand in the water, then the fish can't see anything either. But a fish is not a human. It has a lateral line, an organ that feels the slightest fluctuations in water pressure. In murky water, a predator turns into an ideal acoustic hunter. While transparent lakes suffered from drought and overfishing, J.B. Thomas, due to its unattractiveness, became an ideal incubator. A generation of monsters grew up there that had never seen a lure. But Hollis Greer warned, the window of opportunity at J.B. Thomas is open right now, and it will close quickly. As soon as the fame of this place spread, caravans of boats pulled in. In 5 years, it will be a completely different lake. Those who make it in the next couple of seasons will catch the fish of their lives. The technique here is specific. Forget about thin nuances. You need baits that scream underwater, heavy jigs with rattles, spoons with huge blades that create powerful low-frequency vibration. The fish doesn't need to see the bait. It must hear it and feel it with its skin. A slow retrieve is critically important. In the murky red clay, the predator needs time to localize the target and strike. It's like hunting in a fog. You don't run, you creep. Remember how our grandfathers fished in the silted ponds of the Central Strip or in the murky tributaries of the Sir Daria? They used large, heavy spoons that made a dull thud when they fell, attracting catfish or pike from a great distance. This is not magic. It is the physics of sound in a dense medium. Today's technologies only confirm these old truths. Hollis Greer spent 28 years proving that trophies live where they are not sought. His list is not just geography. It is a lesson in humility for those who believe in marketing more than in ichthyology. Merval with its tannin water, Nakonish with its young energy, Tyler with its century-old wisdom, Nacogdoches with its engineering stability, and finally, J.B. Thomas, the great murky deceiver. The mathematics of the last decade is inexorable. The fisherman who spent weekends fighting the crowd on famous reservoirs caught less and smaller fish than the one who studied boring department reports and went where it was quiet. A fish doesn't know which lake is considered prestigious. It reacts only to three factors: food, shelter, and the absence of stress. And on these 5 lakes, all three factors converged in ideal proportion. While advertising budgets were conquering new markets, nature was creating masterpieces in silence. In the next part, we will analyze exactly how you can use the data of professional ichthyologists to find such gold mines in any region, and why your fish finder might be lying to you. Let's take off the masks and admit the bitter truth. The modern fishing industry is a huge machine for selling illusions, not fish. While you save up for a boat like the professionals on TV, the real Texas records of 2002, when 600 trophy applications were submitted from 207 different reservoirs, literally scream the opposite to us. Just think about that figure. 200 lakes produced giants, but 90% of fishermen continue to storm the same 3 or 4 marketing reservoirs. This is not just a mistake. It is a systemic blindness. We are used to believing that the size of the fish directly depends on the advertising budget of the tournament held on the lake. But Hollis Greer, who worked for almost 30 years as an ichthyologist, proved trophy perch grow where they are not disturbed. This is a conflict between fishing for Instagram and real catch. Remember how in the 70s and 80s, legends were formed across the Union about closed reservoirs at secret research institutes or in exclusion zones, where there were no boats with powerful motors, where the shores were not trampled by armies of tourists. Nature worked wonders. In Kazakhstan, on the Kapchagay, or in the quiet bays of the Dnieper after the war, fish fed entire cities not because they were caught with supergear, but because the ecosystem was in balance. Today we are dealing with pressure, and this is a scientific term. Research shows that a large individual, once caught and released, or even just frightened by the noise of an echo sounder, changes its behavior model for up to several months. It goes into survival mode, stops reacting to standard lures, and shifts to zones that fishermen consider unpromising. That is why the 5 lakes from Hollis's list are not just points on a map. They are a refuge for those who do not want to be part of the show. Take that same J.B. Thomas, which in early 2025 surpassed all the famous lakes of the state in the number of trophies. This is a real spit in the face of armchair experts who insisted that fish do not grow in murky water. Science tells us that in conditions of zero visibility, a predator's lateral line sensitivity becomes hypertrophied. This is a complex organ consisting of neuromasts that pick up microscopic changes in water pressure. For a perch in the murky J.B. Thomas, your bait is not a picture. It is a sound image, a vibrational signature. If you use thin, quiet lures in such water, you are committing a biological crime against your catch. You need noisy tools here. The old-fashioned method of soldering metal balls into homemade spoons or using heavy spoons that create a powerful wave during retrieval. That's what works in the clay hell. This is not a myth. It is physics. We often hear advice: look for clear water, look for fry on the fish finder. But Hollis Greer knew. Fry on the fish finder also mean hundreds of teenage predators creating food competition. But a real grandfather, weighing 5 to 6 kilograms, stands aside, in the thickest snags, where the fish finder signal simply scatters from interference. Nakonish is a prime example. Its hidden status is due to the fact that fishing there is hellish work. It's not a boat ride, it's tearing through a flooded forest. But it is there, among the rotting trunks, that the maximum amount of heat is released during the decomposition of organic matter, which makes these zones 1 to 2 degrees warmer than the surrounding space in winter. For a cold-blooded predator, this 1 degree is the difference between lying like a log and aggressively attacking. Now about the main tool that Hollis left us instead of his secret journals. This is a reservoir assessment system that we have packed into a water reading module. These are not just tips. It is an ichthyologist's algorithm. How to determine a trophy structure without a guide. How to understand that a gold mine is in front of you and not an empty hole, just by looking at a depth map and soil type. For example, the 5 signs of trophy water include an analysis of bottom sediments and thermocline stability. Most fishermen don't even know what a thermocline is. Yet this is the boundary above which the fish will suffocate and below which it will freeze. On lakes like Nacogdoches, the stability of this layer is the guarantee that the fish will stay at the same depth for years. Our annual fishing calendar is a separate story altogether. We analyzed 20 years of data to understand in which specific weeks, specific lakes fire off their giants. This is not fortune-telling. This is TPWD statistics, translated into understandable language. Did you know that on Lake Tyler, the peak of trophy activity occurs in the windows when the water temperature passes the 14 degrees Celsius mark from top to bottom, not bottom to top? These are subtle biological settings that separate a random catch from systemic success. We are destroying the myth that to catch a record fish, you need to go to the end of the world. No, you just need to go where advertising budgets don't lead. Hollis Greer, in 28 years, didn't just catch fish. He recorded how human stupidity and following fashion free up entire reservoirs for those who know how to read numbers. His personal journal is evidence that the biggest fish were caught at moments when there was not a single other boat on the lake. This is quiet hunting in the most literal sense. We are used to trusting advice from fishing stores, but remember, the seller needs to sell you a lure, but the ichthyologist needs to understand the truth. And the truth is that the 5 lakes on our list are just the tip of the iceberg. They are an example of how to search. Murvol, Nakonish, Tyler, Nacogdoches, and J.B. Thomas are your textbooks on the geography of victories. We have reached the finish line, and now I will tear the last veil from what armchair experts call luck, and professionals like Hollis Greer call biological regularity. Let's dissect the main myth on which the industry is built. To catch a big fish, you need the most expensive lure. Complete nonsense. A trophy predator doesn't care about the brand engraved on the plastic. It is interested in only one thing: the ratio of energy expended to calories received. This is the law of survival that hasn't changed for millions of years. Science calls this specific dynamic action, the metabolic cost of digesting food. A large individual in lakes like Murvol or J.B. Thomas will not chase small fry. It waits for a sure thing. That is why the tactic of fast combing, which tournament videos teach us, often fails on pressured or, conversely, wild reservoirs. Why do old-fashioned methods sometimes misfire? Many still firmly believe in lunar phases or secret anise drops. Let's break this down from an ichthyological perspective. The main enemy of the bite is not a bad moon phase, but a sharp change in the partial pressure of oxygen dissolved in the water, O2. When atmospheric pressure drops, the solubility of gases changes, and the fish experiences something like a mild decompression sickness. At this moment, its swim bladder expands, creating discomfort. The old advice, fish on a drop in pressure, works only in one case, if you know where the thermocline is. On Lake Nacogdoches, thanks to its unique stability, the thermocline does not wander vertically. The fish knows exactly where the comfort level is. And if you cast above or below this narrow strip, usually 1 to 1.5 meters wide, you won't catch anything, even if you have a $1,000 lant rod in your hands. Big bait for big fish is a half-truth that ruins thousands of fishing trips. In the conditions of Lake Tyler or Nakanish, where the water can be crystal clear or moderately transparent, the opposite principle works. Match the hatch. If small bleak or fingerling perch dominate the reservoir, your huge 10-inch lure will look like an alien ship. Hollis Greer noted in his records, the largest specimens in Tyler were taken on delicate rigs that imitated not an aggressor, but easy prey. This conflicts with the traditional approach where people went for pike with a spoon the size of a palm. Yes, in the murky J.B. Thomas, volume and vibration decide everything. But in the clear water of stable lakes, your main ally is invisibility. Here is a practical guide on rigging for quiet lakes, so you don't just watch the video, but actually catch fish. Remember 3 key combinations for these 5 reservoirs. For Merval and J.B. Thomas, murky water, use a Texas rig with a bullet weight made of brass, not lead. Why? Brass, when hitting a glass bead, gives a sharp, high-frequency click that the fish hears with its lateral line through the clay suspension. The bait color should be exclusively Junebug, dark purple with sparkles, or black and blue. These are the only spectra that maintain a contrasting silhouette at depth in murky water. For Nakanish, snags, only offset hooks with a wide gap. Your task is a vertical fall. Use a heavy cheburashka or a free swinging head so the bait plays on the fall along the tree trunk. Remember, 90% of trophy bites in snags happen in the first 2 seconds after the bait touches the bottom. For Tyler and Nacogdoches, clear water, a fluorocarbon leader is mandatory. The refraction index of fluorocarbon, 1.42, is close to that of water, by 1.33, making it practically invisible. Use a drop shot rig with a long leader so the bait hovers over the bottom debris without kicking up silt. Hollis Greer retired in 2003, but his legacy is a manifesto against the herd instinct. He proved with numbers that while 95% of fishermen compete in who can exhaust the resources of famous lakes faster, the other 5% enjoy world-class fishing in silence. This is that very quiet hunting, praised by the classics of literature. They understood that fishing is not a sport of high achievements, but a deep immersion in the biological rhythms of the planet. Fishing traditions were always built on observation. The old-timers knew, if the birds went silent and the fry pressed against the shore, the predator had come out to hunt. Modern technologies only confirm these observations with graphs and sensors, but no fish finder will replace the understanding of why the fish is standing right here. It stands here because it is safe, there is stable oxygen, and there is no noise from your motors. We have revealed to you 5 secret spots that for decades produced records in silence. But it's not just about Texas. These principles work everywhere. Look for reservoirs that are inconvenient for marketing. Look for murky water that everyone considers dead. Look for an old lake with bad roads. For those who want to move from theory to practice and learn to read the water as Hollis Greer did, we have opened our knowledge base. This is your analytical center. Inside, you will find a complete module on reading water, how to understand where a trophy stands by the relief of the shore and the type of vegetation without turning on a fish finder. The 5 signs of large fish module, biological markers that unerringly indicate the presence of a master specimen. and an annual fishing calendar, a detailed activity schedule for each type of reservoir based on 20 years of catch statistics. The link is pinned in the first comment. This is one-time access. No subscriptions or hidden fees, only pure knowledge. Remember, trophies never lived in magazines. They always lived in lakes that no one wanted to look at. If this story has changed the way you look at the quiet, forgotten corners of the map, then subscribe to our channel. We are excavating the history and the secrets that they have tried to bury under layers of marketing noise. Plant the seeds of your future success. The next treasure trove of knowledge will be opened very soon. Don't forget to like this video if you're ready to leave the crowds behind.